I'm not sure that the church's main focus and goal is to alleviate poverty. So the church is the one institution that will preach and proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. So in a sense, I don't want the church to become distracted with meeting physical needs sort of in a vacuum or by itself. I think one of the things that's really important about answering that question is that we define poverty properly. Because I think if you sort of accurately capture what it means to be poor, then I think actually it kind of clarifies the answer to the question. I tend to think of poverty as being you don't have enough money, you don't have access to health care and those things. And that's certainly a significant part of it. But when poor people actually talked about what it was like to be poor, they talked about words like shame, hopelessness, isolation, and those kinds of things. And I think when you understand that, then you begin to see how the church actually is the answer to sort of real deep poverty, because it is the gospel that reconciles us to God, takes away our shame, brings us out of isolation into community. And so in that sense, the church is God's answer to real, genuine poverty. So I know, just for example, we have worked with people in a local homeless shelter in our church. And many of those folks would have laptop computers, phones, they have 3 meals a day, air-conditioned spaces, things like that. So by my standards, I wouldn't want to trade places with them, right? I think of them as poor, right? But by sort of global standard, they're living at a sort of quality of life far above what most people in the world, actually live in. And so it kind of redefines, but they're poor. They're actually experiencing that sort of alienation and other things, right? Just having access to air conditioning doesn't solve their sort of deeper problems. They need the gospel. I remember talking to one man. We were distributing food and handing out flyers for one of our Spanish language church plants. And I met a man, and I don't speak Spanish, but I was with a man who could translate. And as we began to talk with him, he told us that he hadn't eaten for about 2.5 days. And as we began to talk, he made it clear that he actually wasn't really all that bothered by it because he was pretty used to it from back home. And in fact, the reason why he hadn't eaten is because he had sent all of his money back home, all the money that he was making. And so he just hadn't made enough recently to provide for himself. But he was quite joyful and thought this is as good as he'd ever really had it in his life. And so those different interactions have kind of helped me realize maybe our understanding of poverty is a little bit too tied into just access to resources. And when we make that mistake, I think then we get confused about how the church is meant to alleviate poverty. So we do provide food for hungry people, because how can we say that we love our brother if we're not going to provide for them? But in the same sense, we understand that if all we do is provide food, we haven't really given them the sort of greatest resource that God's given us to the real poverty of our souls.